So my name's John. Now I'm a blue belt at Kama Jiu-Jitsu. I spend my days in an office, not on a pretty blue mat like Ryan gets to. So a lot of my time is desk bound, and in the evenings I like to come here and roll. So I'm an associate for a major credit card acquirer, so I investigate credit card fraud and money laundering, transaction laundering, things of that nature.
Oh, that's
so that's my day job. It's interesting, but you're sitting a lot. You're spending a lot of time locked into things in a very inactive position. So to say I had a sedentary lifestyle to kind of set the backdrop for this whole video is pretty accurate. I've had this job since I was 20. So for a long time I've yo-yoed, and I think that's true of a lot of people. So throughout most of my life, I've yo-yoed. When I was really young, I was over 200 pounds at 12 years old. So I started off big, but not big boned and strong, like big. And I went through high school that way until I started powerlifting around at 16 years old. And once I started powerlifting, I cut quite a bit of weight and built muscle. Felt pretty good about myself. But as soon as you get out of high school and you start working and start moving on with life, priorities change and you kind of lose sight of what might have got you there. Ultimately, when I lost that weight, I still didn't know what I was doing. I still didn't know a fraction of what I know now, what I've come to learn through, just the advances in YouTube and the internet, social media, and all the studies that are now being done on some of these methods for, controlling your diet and controlling your hormone levels. So this really started with diet. Diet was the key. Diet was the beginning. I didn't start jiu-jitsu until I was down to probably around 250 pounds. I started at 309, 310. That was my all-time heaviest. Probably around 30 years old, and I had this thing on my arm, like an infection that wouldn't go away. And I went to urgent care and I get some prescription antibiotics, still wouldn't go away. And eventually ended up going to the ER on Thanksgiving morning, and my blood sugar was like 356 or something crazy, which if you're over, 300 at any point in your life, you have a problem. Found out I had type 2 diabetes right before my friends and family were going to dig into ice cream and pumpkin pie. So I had a pretty somber Thanksgiving, but that still didn't really kickstart it for me. It still took me a couple of years of really thinking about what my 40s were going to look like and try to think and envision what my life was going to become if I didn't make some changes. That scared me. So the family history that I have with my uncle and my aunt, heart disease, renal failure, morbid obesity, over 400 pounds, just kind of being lonely, not being active, not really enjoying life and not living it to its fullest.
It's stagnant.
Life moves fast. Before you know it, you're 34 years old. Life moves fast. Yeah, I remember being 28, and I remember being 28 knowing that the cutoff to become a Navy SEAL was coming up. And I remember it was just before I found I had diabetes, so I was in bad shape. And I remember thinking that I never got to serve my country, and I wanted to, and I didn't because of how much I weighed in high school. I was a senior. I was 17 when 9/11 happened. So I watched from study hall, watched the towers get hit. I watched the second plane live crash into the tower. And I felt really guilty for a long time, not being able to go and serve my country and do something that I really wanted to do. And I knew that age was creeping up, and that was 28, 29. And, there was encouraging words, oh, you should go do it. You should lose the weight and go try for it. And it didn't work out that way. And then fast forward, a couple years later, I have diabetes and I'm having to tackle a whole new set of problems. So it started psychologically with the decisions. So the first thing that I had was something to run away from. I was afraid of being sick in my older age, not being able to move, just being in pain. I've seen a lot of people in pain that are they get older, their bodies don't work correctly. And really, I felt like my body was betraying me because I could see my blood sugar, so I could see how my body would respond to food. And it was alarming. I would look and I'd eat something that they would tell you was healthy, in a health coaching class, and you'd come to find out your body is telling you it's not healthy because your blood sugar shot up significantly. And the blood sugar swings were something that I first started trying to study to avoid. And at first it was a paleo book, and then Little Decisions. So I knew I didn't want to be big anymore, and I wanted to get my blood sugar under control, and I really wanted to reverse diabetes if I could. I heard some podcasts and things saying that it was possible to at least reverse a lot of the symptoms and the problems that could plague you with diabetes, you know, losing your feet, your eyesight, all kinds of things. Yeah. So I had that to run away from. And then I had, you know, kind of started getting glimpses of these other things that I could do. Maybe I could climb Mount Washington. Maybe I could go hiking, you know, without getting tired or burning up my calves. Maybe I could go for a jog. Maybe I could start riding bicycles again. Maybe I could buy clothes that looked nice instead of having to rummage through 2X, you know, shirts and things like that. So when you felt like that, you feel terrible anyway, it's really easy to drink or not really care what you're doing with your diet or what you're drinking. So it's not it's the furthest thing from your mind that, you know, there are all these obstacles standing in front of you that are preventing you from feeling better. And to be honest, I never really knew what it was like to be smaller. I've always been big. So I've never had knowledge all throughout my teens, 20s. I got a little taste of it when I was 17, but not much. Still over 200. So I never really got to know what it was like to move or go go climbing in the mountains or lift weights or do jiu-jitsu or be in any kind of shape where I could sustain energy for long enough to learn something like this. And then once I started making certain decisions, like I quit alcohol. I did that in September of probably 2015. I'd say 2015. I got engaged to my wife in July of 2015. And, you know, we had fun camping when we got engaged. It was a good time. And around September, I just kind of said, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm just done with it. I'm going to put the beer away and see how I feel. And I started feeling better. And then it was one meal at a time, and I picked one meal. And it kind of had a twofold effect. So spending a lot of money going out to eat, because, you know, you get kind of lazy and you start buying food out. You know, you can tell, you know, when you're doing something that's not right. Yeah. When you're doing something that's against yourself, not in your own best interest, whether it's going out to eat and eating bad food that you don't have control over. You know, I don't have control over what they put on that steak or how they cook that. And I can order certain things and try to get around it and not be a total stick in the mud, but at the same time, the best way to control what you eat is to cook it yourself. And it's also a lot less expensive. So dinner became the meal. Dinner was one meal. So that was a rule that I didn't violate. And all these rules, I didn't violate them in the beginning. And I just kind of trusted the process because I understood that there was a pretty good likelihood based on the research I did that I may not crave carbohydrates anymore. I may not crave some of these things that I could tell had a direct effect on my blood sugar. And I could tell that because I monitored it. So I know for me, and this may not be the same for anybody else, that when I eat certain foods, my body just doesn't work properly. And that may be the damage I've done to myself over the years of eating poorly and making bad decisions. Whatever it is, I just know that I've had my fill of those foods and I can't really go there anymore. The eating was a lifestyle change, and the Gracie's have their diet that they've found success with. So you have the Gracie diet, and that's one method of looking at it, but that's a lifestyle too. And the jiu-jitsu is a lifestyle. It's all lifestyle choices. And you know, when you find something physical that you really enjoy, that gets kind of addicting, it's easy to keep up with activities like that, and also knowing that they're making you better, they're making you healthier. I started diet probably a year before I went to the CTC. So I got married in 2016. I dropped down to around 265 pounds. I hadn't started jiu-jitsu yet. That was October. And then
what year?
Of 2016. Okay. And then we got into January 2017, and sometime around December, early January, I said, I'm going to do jiu-jitsu. And I called very half-heartedly. You know, I was about 265 pounds still. I made it through the holidays, didn't get dinged up with snacks and cookies. I avoided it all. I didn't lie to myself. I said, nope, that cookie is a lie. I'm not eating it. I'm not listening to it. I guess I did the same thing to get me into jiu-jitsu, is that I said, with the diet, I was committed, and then all of a sudden I just committed to jiu-jitsu. The same way I kind of did with diet. I said, well, I want to try this and I want to do it. So I signed on the dotted line. I paid my money. I got my gi, got my white belt, started training, and became pretty obsessed pretty fast with the videos and the learning. And the learning sucked me into it, and the diet kept up with everything, and it fit in. My energy levels are really good. They're getting better. I was dropping weight. I think I started out at an A5, pretty big size for a short guy. I had to really hem the pants big time, and now I'm down to basically like an A1, A1H. Jiu-jitsu was the first physical activity that I picked up. I've picked up some others since. I never picked up weightlifting again or anything like that. But jiu-jitsu is the first consistent physical activity that I started doing after I had some success with diet. And they did go hand in hand. They reinforced one another. I definitely felt that it tapped into my inner nerd big time, because you had the videos that the CTC put out, and now we have on the Patreon channel, where you can see techniques. I mean, maybe someone does this, but I would never be one to go watch people lift weights on YouTube. I wouldn't sit there for hours on end. But you watch people do jiu-jitsu moves and try all these different things, and you can get sucked into a couple hours of YouTube videos if you're not careful, watching these different moves. And then the difference becomes at some point, what kind of moves and what kind of jiu-jitsu do you want to do? So I knew that early on the self-defense was a clear one, and we talked about that in the other video, that the self-defense aspect and the practicality of if I got into a fight and someone's trying to punch me in the face, I can handle the situation as best as possible, better than someone with no training. But the cerebral part was played into that. I enjoy a lot of things. I like hunting and fishing. I like my job. My job's pretty interesting at times. I love jiu-jitsu. I actually really like cooking. So I've had to adapt my cooking style to my diet, and it's worked out pretty well. I've gotten pretty good at smoking briskets and doing steaks and chicken and all kinds of things.
Bob probably helps a little bit with that.
He does in his channel. I just started picking up trail running, and I picked up trail running because it was interesting to me. Kind of the same thing jiu-jitsu was to me, as it interested me, and I was attracted to it, and now I'm going to try it. Yeah, I don't foresee myself quitting. I don't think there's no finish line. When I think about jiu-jitsu, I don't think about, when that's done and I've accomplished this. It doesn't register in that way. Yeah. If my life is a stool and I have different legs and I have fishing, I really love bass fishing. I did competitive bass fishing for a while. I'm starting to really like trail running, and I love jiu-jitsu, and you have all these things that kind of balance out your life, and jiu-jitsu has become one of them.
Cool.
And if it were mindless, I probably wouldn't stick around that long. I wouldn't do it for 2 years. I've moved on. I've done a lot of different things. And there's some things I put down and I pick up again later. But there's some things that I pick up and I don't really put down. And jiu-jitsu has been one of them. That coupled with the diet. So the diet got me in the door, and then jiu-jitsu and the diet have kind of kept me going and improving. Because I've been guilty of, when I started college, around this past fall, my diet slipped a bit, and I could tell. You feel it on the mat. You can feel your energy levels. You can tell. You can feel the difference. And after having a good diet, for probably a really good diet for about a year and a half, that worked for me. When that changed a little bit, that you could definitely feel it. You can keep doing jiu-jitsu all you want, but if you throw your diet out the window and you forget it completely, it could be a problem for you. Yeah, especially you got Bob with his barbecue. The barbecue's in. Everyone's real supportive, and there's actually a few guys here that do the same type of diet or same types of diet. And others have found success. And at one point we had a competition going between a couple of us, and it kind of went off the rails, and it didn't really end totally, but I technically did win, not just by default. I actually hit the weight target, but I won't rub salt in wounds. I did it, and I knew I could do it. And obviously I had a pretty good understanding at that point when I made the bet that I knew what I was capable of, and I knew I could do the right things to get to that weight. And 170 wasn't an out of question weight for me. And I'm a bit above that now, but I could definitely get back down to 170, and I will. And what causes that is going on and off fad diets, not making lifestyle changes don't cause that. Because if you make a lifestyle change, it does last, and you can make adjustments within it. So right now, that's what I'm trying to do, is fine tune what I eat. Now that I've figured out I can make food do what I kind of want, make my body respond in certain ways, I'm trying to kind of play with it now and see what I can optimize. How can I make it a little bit better? Kama Jiu-Jitsu has been really supportive. My wife's been really supportive. My parents have been really supportive. A lot of my friends, especially back in New Hampshire when I started going and doing this, they're really supportive. So people have been genuinely great in helping me. But I will tell you, it is tough when people want to go out to eat and they want pizza or something. I haven't had pizza in 3 or 4 years. Since I started, 2015, 3.5 years. I haven't had pizza. I just, I love pizza, but not that much. I'm a little crazy about it. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little crazy when it comes to diet. But I felt like that's what I needed to do. So that was one thing, and I think this is really important because it never worked for me, but everyone has said at one point, well, it's all in moderation. If someone wants to hand you a cookie, or it's just a cookie, it's all in moderation. But to be totally honest and fair, maybe it's not in moderation, because I can clearly remember a lot of beginning this and the sugar cravings, and then all of a sudden you're walking through the grocery store, even though you're staying on the perimeter to get the healthy foods, you can smell the bread aisle. All of a sudden your sense of smell is jacked up for anything sweet. You can really start smelling things that I could tell my sense of smell actually got better. There's no moderation sometimes. You might be lying to yourself. I've had a lot of people tell me you just need to eat less. You need to count calories. You're just genetically predisposed to being heavier. Yeah, genetics can play a part in what diet your body prefers, but ultimately, we're not all that different from one another, and we've all evolved a certain way. There's no way we would have evolved to where we're at today as human beings if you had to have some kind of calorie counter up in your head like an accountant, making sure that carry the one for that pizza because he ate that. That's not how we've
Slice of pepperoni.
Yeah. Human beings are equipped to go for days without eating if they had to hunt. Human beings are equipped to eat, untraditional diets. You think of the food pyramid and it's mostly grains at the bottom. I haven't seen any video of Alaska where they have cornfields, up where the Eskimos live, the Inuit. I don't see Inuit growing corn to go along with all their seal blubber and their cod. So the way that they survive the winter up there is they eat fish, but you can't eat fish alone. You can't just eat the protein. So the seal oil and whale oil becomes very important. You could starve to death without that, but with the whale oil and the seal oil, they're able to sustain themselves through a winter, and they're not growing cabbage patches and cornfields.
It's an ice patch.
They're on the tundra with those big polar bears, other predators, and they're surviving. So the body's pretty adaptable, but we're not all totally that different. I do think of me at 30 when I got that diagnosis, and I do think of maybe other people that are in that same position because I knew where I was at and I knew how I felt. And I most definitely felt like no one understood, that no one was able to help me. And especially, a lot of doctors failed me. They didn't give you the information that you really needed to affect a change in your body type and your metabolism, your hormone levels. Insulin causes you to store fat. It prevents you from accessing body fat as a fuel source. So when your blood sugar is really high and your body's trying to flood your pancreas is flooding your blood with insulin, trying to store that and because glucose too much in your system is not good for you. Obviously, you have all the complications of diabetes. It's trying to shuttle that somewhere, get it out of your bloodstream so you're not losing your eyesight or losing feet. It's doing damage to your body. Your body's trying to mitigate it, but it can't. The cells They become insulin resistant. They shut down. They don't allow any of the fat or the glucose to come into the cell because they can't handle what they have in them already. Yeah. So there's kind of an internal starvation thing going on where inside your cells, they're starving for energy because nothing can get through that barrier that your cells have put up. And you have all this energy in your blood that isn't doing you any good. You're hungry. You're not satisfied. You can't possibly eat enough, but everything you're eating isn't going where you need it to. When I would turn food down and things like that with people that I knew, that knew me and knew my sense of humor, I'd say, I can't. I'm metabolically deranged. I can't eat that. Metabolically deranged was my excuse for saying that cookie is a lie. That cookie is lying to me.
The cake is a lie.
Yeah, moderation didn't work for me. And that was something that I couldn't find the information out there. And really I focused a lot of my research on longevity because, again, what I was scared of is getting sick. I didn't focus as much on performance until later when I could start enjoying some of that. There were priorities. Not dying was kind of the first one. And then quality of life got better, and you said, well, what can I do now? Can I run a trail run? Someday could I do an ultra marathon? I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting to be 310 pounds one year, and then next year, you're still working hard at jiu-jitsu and you're dieting and you're in good shape, and now all of a sudden you're going to run 50 miles somewhere. I'll never have that runner's body. I'm not built that way, and I won't ever have that runner's body, but hopefully I'll always have a jiu-jitsu body. Hopefully.
Well, cool.
Or at least defend myself. Yeah, I'm definitely not special. I got some information and I was able to run with it and do some things with it. But I mean, there's people out there that are in great shape all the time that never had anything to overcome. They've always been pretty good about their eating, and so just because I kind of went and messed up the early part of my life and had to turn around and get it back together doesn't mean that I did this great thing. I just kind of found a path. Everyone kind of needs to answer that question for themselves. If they find themselves asking that question to themselves, what am I going to look like and feel like when I'm 40? What am I going to look back and wish that I did? And what am I going to miss by not making a better decision now? Because you can't get years back. You can have faith in a lot of things, but you don't necessarily know where that road's going to lead. And if you've watched any loved ones pass away from a heart attack at a relatively young age in their mid-50s or an aneurysm, family like mine, that I watched my aunt and uncle, they didn't really get to have a life. They didn't meet a significant other. They didn't get out and date. They weren't social people. They lived very sheltered existences. They ate themselves to death, and they died of heart disease and an aneurysm. When you see that kind of thing, or if you can at least envision that kind of thing, that might be your drive to get started and start looking for some of this other information. If you're in that position, or you're afraid that you might end up in that position, and you start thinking 10, 20, 30 years out, what do you want your life to look like? You have to gain an understanding of yourself to a degree, because trying is one thing. You can try to do. I tried a lot of things. I tried really hard to use moderation. I tried a lot of things, but what doesn't happen, until it clicks of why. The why. You have to know the answer to that question of why you're doing what you're doing. Why you're not going to go get pizza. Why? How many times I've walked up and down an aisle at a grocery store looking at things I knew I shouldn't buy, leaving with a pork chop or something instead to cook up at home with some asparagus because that's what I was supposed to do. I mean, there have been plenty of times that if I didn't have that question answered already of why am I doing this? Why am I eating like this? Why am I eating so different from everybody around me? Why am I not partaking in this cupcake? Why? And knowing why makes it a lot easier when you're sitting there in front of a cupcake going, I'm not going to eat that. I'm not going to eat that sloppy cupcake. Get the thing out of my face. I don't want it. Get it away from me. It's taunting me. I'm going to smash it. Get it out of my face. I'm going to smash that cupcake. I think the why is And that goes back to the psychological thing, because you need to know the answers to those questions so you can make those decisions, so you can try. Otherwise, it's kind of like going to the gym without a plan. You start moving stuff around, start loading up bars.
I know,
you know,
what I'm doing.
you put 375 on one side of a squat rack and you put 175 on the other side of the squat rack, and you try doing it and you don't really know why, you're just trying it. Well, I mean, you kind of got to have a little bit of a goal when you walk in there and, know what you're going to do. Really start thinking of it and planning it. So a couple things that you might be able to do to kind of start the process of thinking about this, even before you pick up a diet book and do research on dieting and what to eat or how you should eat as a human being or anything like that. Dr. Jordan Peterson does a future authoring program, is really aimed at defining what it is you're running away from and what it is you'd be running towards. So getting your mind right psychologically and preparing to actually make these changes and being very clear on why you're doing it. You may not have an idea of your goal. And when I began this, I intentionally said I'm not focusing on a weight, and I didn't weigh myself. I only focused on decisions. I didn't waste any effort to see what my progress was, because my progress was making the changes that I needed to make. It wasn't a number on a scale. It wasn't, am I closer to being 180 pounds like I wanted to? Because honestly, I could never at that weight envision being 175 pounds or 170 pounds. It didn't exist. That wasn't even a possibility to me. So getting your mind right and doing something where you really outline what it is you want out of your life and what you want it to look like or would like it to look like and what you don't want it to look like. And then from there, you can kind of see the decisions and the cascade effect that those decisions are going to have on those next 10, 20 years, because it all builds. If you think about this 10 years from now, you think about what you were like 10 years ago. So if I think back to when I was 34 years old or 24 years old from 34, and I think, man, if only those last 10 years I spent doing what I've been doing the last couple of years, what shape could I have been in? What could I have done? Could I have started jiu-jitsu earlier? Could I have taken advantage of all that time that I've lost? Put yourself in that next space where you're now 44 and go, I'm 34 now. If I were 44, what would I wish I did? What decisions would I wish I made? And how would my 44-year-old self tell my 34-year-old self to take care of himself or herself? That's really, I think, the most significant thing that made these lifestyle changes stick. And after that, when you start playing with diet and you start looking at the keto or whatever diet you choose to pursue, it becomes a lot easier to start following some of those prescriptive ways of eating to affect the change that you're looking for, knowing what you're going towards and what you're running away from. I'd probably want to just leave saying, anyone can do it. It really depends on what you want and making the decision. It's kind of like training. If you want to learn jiu-jitsu, you can come in and start training. It's intimidating at first, but you'll start answering that question of why you're doing it pretty quick. And I guess I'll sign off and say happy training.